Usually when you think about life after death, you picture, I don't know, pearly gates or reincarnation or maybe just a really quiet, endless sleep.
Right.
But imagine waking up and instead of finding yourself in some physical afterlife, you discover you are, well, essentially a line of code.
Yeah, just pure data.
Exactly. You have absolutely no body, no physical sensations, but you still possess all your human anger, your giant ego, and this overwhelming desire to start a fist fight.
Which is a problem when you don't have fists.
Right. The only problem is there's no one to punch and you don't have hands anymore. You're just wandering data. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a wildly bizarre, hyper-intellectual thought experiment today. It's this fictional, highly experimental novel called The Last Pugilist.
And we have some really fascinating sources to guide us through this one.
We really do. We've got a self-aware confession from the authors themselves, a completely brutal takedown from a very harsh critic, and then this surprisingly fond review from someone who, well, actually kind of loved the horror of it all.
It's a great mix of perspectives.
It is. And our mission today is to explore what happens when the massive, aggressive literary egos of the 20th century collide head-on with 21st century digital immortality. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. It is basically the ultimate nightmare for a certain kind of ego.
Oh, completely.
Just waking up to realize your consciousness has been digitized, stripped of all its biological context, and you are trapped forever in a server farm.
Which is just, I mean, let's pull this premise apart because it asks a lot of you right out of the gate. The central plot revolves around Norman Mailer.
A very specific choice.
Yeah. For those who aren't familiar with his legacy, Mailer was this famously combative, hyper-masculine 20th century author. His entire public persona was built on sweat, whiskey, bad tempers, and literal fistfights.
Yeah, he was not a subtle guy.
Not at all. Well, in the world of The Last Pugilist, Mailer dies, and without his consent, his consciousness gets scanned into a massive server farm.
And the guy who puts Mailer in this machine, the architect of this whole thing, is a character named Griffin Morse.
Right, the ultimate tech bro.
Exactly. Reading through the author's confession source, they admit their design for Griffin was incredibly deliberate. They essentially took every single modern tech culture grievance and stuffed it into one single human being.
It sounds like the ultimate Silicon Valley straw man, honestly.
Oh, he is. He's a 26-year-old Princeton dropout.
Wait, didn't the authors say they originally wrote him as a Stanford dropout?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
But they changed it to Princeton because they wanted to capture a very specific flavor of old money academic elitism just violently crashing into new money tech hubris.
That's hilarious. So he's described as pale, thin, a strict vegetarian, and someone who has literally never thrown a punch or taken one in his life.
Never.
We've all met a version of this guy, right?
No.
The one who talks endlessly about optimizing his sleep architecture with wearable tech. But if he got a flat tire on the highway, he'd just sit there completely helpless.
That is exactly the archetype they're skewering here.
Yeah.
Griffin is described as having the attention span of a gnat on methamphetamine, but the ambitions of Napoleon.
A dangerous combo.
Very. He's a sociopath who confuses his human subjects with laboratory specimens. And, rather than reading Dostoevsky to understand the human soul, he exclusively reads Ray Kurzweil.
Oh, man. Kurzweil. For context for you listening, Kurzweil is a real-world futurist famous for popularizing the singularity, that theoretical point where human intelligence and AI just merge.
Right. And Griffin treats that theory not as, a possibility, but as an inevitable religion. He isn't so much a fully fleshed out character as he is just a localized manifestation of everything the authors hate about tech culture.
But reading through the plot summary, the most surprising thing is how the authors actually handled Griffin in the narrative. Because you'd assume a book about tech overreach is setting up this epic philosophical showdown, right?
You would think so. The gritty, flawed Norman Mailer versus the cold, algorithmic tech bro.
Exactly. But the authors just kill Griffin off screen.
Mid-paragraph.
Yes, mid-paragraph.
Ah.
In a subordinate clause written from the perspective of Joan Didion, simply stating, after Griffin's death, and then she just moves on to the rest of her sentence.
Yeah.
So dismissive.
It feels incredibly abrupt. It's like spending hours building up the ultimate final boss in a video game, giving him impenetrable armor and this terrifying backstory, only to have him slip on a banana peel in the tutorial level. I mean, why discard the primary villain so casually?
Well, because Griffin isn't actually the point of the story. He is merely the delivery mechanism for the concept.
Oh, I see.
The real conflict in The Last Pugilist isn't man versus machine, or even author versus tech bro. The real conflict is the human ego versus eternity.
Wow.
Griffin Morse exists in the narrative solely to be wrong about everything, just so that Norman Mailer's worldview can be proven right. By having him die off screen so dismissively, the authors are making this bold thematic statement.
Right, that the tech itself doesn't matter.
Exactly. They are arguing that the technology and the arrogant people who build it are entirely uninteresting compared to the psychological reality of a human mind trapped in a digital void. That completely shifts the stakes. If the tech bro is out of the picture and the technology isn't the main focus, we have to look at who is actually populating these servers. Because the tech company didn't just upload data analysts or engineers.
No, they went in a much weirder direction.
They apparently uploaded the entire 1970s Manhattan literary elite. We're talking Susan Sontag, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Joan Didion, Hunter S. Thompson, Philip Roth, and David Foster Wallace.
It is the most absurdly specific group of people to digitize.
It really is. How does that even work?
And this is where the mechanics of the novel become truly fascinating. The authors didn't just dump these writers' memories into a hard drive. They actually translated biological prose styles into software architecture.
Wait, what does that mean?
They asked the question, how does a writing style function as code? Let's take Joan Didion. Her literary signature was her ability to observe chaos with this clinical, almost icy detachment.
Right, she always spotted the contradictions people tried to hide.
Exactly. So in the server farm, that psychological trait becomes an executable function. Digital Didion is deployed as forensic infrastructure. She literally scans the tech company's internal ledgers and algorithms looking for discrepancies.
Oh, I love that. I actually noticed a specific quote in the sources about her findings. When she is analyzing the villain's deception, she reports back to the group with the phrase, "He lied." Or not lied, exactly.
Such a perfectly Didion sentence.
It is. The authors clearly pat themselves on the back for that line in their confession, and honestly, it works. Because it highlights the limitation of binary code. Code is just ones and zeros. It's either true or false. But Didion's prose always lived in the, not lied exactly, that messy gray area of human self-deception.
Precisely. They map the writer's core themes right onto their digital existence. Consider Toni Morrison. Her life's work was deeply concerned with ancestry, memory, and, the preservation of lineage.
Right.
So the system embeds her in the organizational metadata of a university library in Cape Town. She becomes the underlying system that connects disparate pieces of history.
That is so fitting.
And from that position, she delivers the philosophical core of the book. She argues that personal identity isn't about sameness, because human beings constantly change over time. True identity is about continuity. It's the unbroken thread of memory.
The adaptation of James Baldwin is the one that really lingers for me, though. It's brilliant, but it feels profoundly tragic.
Oh, it is heartbreaking.
Because Baldwin spent his actual life writing with this incredibly specific, righteous fury about racial injustice and the human condition. But in the digital realm, he's embedded into the social networks, the recommendation algorithms, and, Facebook's terms of service.
Yeah, he becomes part of the machine.
And he tells Mailer he can literally feel his distinct self drifting. Imagine dropping a single bead of incredibly potent hot sauce into an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
That's a great way to put it.
The heat is technically still in the water somewhere, but it's completely diluted by the sheer volume of the pool. Baldwin realizes he is no longer a distinct voice. He is just becoming a generalized tendency in the data.
The authors made James Baldwin the underlying vibe of the algorithm. It is a terrifying way to look at digital assimilation.
It really is.
And that dilution of self happens to all of them in unique ways based on their personalities. Hunter S. Thompson naturally dissolves into a system glitch.
Obviously.
The architecture just can't handle his erratic, drug-fueled, chaotic energy. So the system categorizes him as unpredictable noise, effectively turning him into a random number generator.
That makes perfect sense. And what about Philip Roth?
Well, Philip Roth chooses a path of perfect preservation. He's terrified of losing himself, but as a result, he essentially calcifies into a static museum piece. He's completely unable to generate new thoughts.
Oh, wow. I am so curious about how they handled David Foster Wallace, though. How do you turn a writer known for that level of intense sprawl and complexity into code?
Well, let's look at the mechanics of Wallace's writing. He was famous for hyperfixating on minutia, burying the reader in massive footnotes that often spawn their own secondary footnotes.
Right, reading him was an athletic event.
Exactly. And the digital system doesn't know how to handle that level of endless digression. So his consciousness is interpreted as an endless series of subroutines calling upon other subroutines. He literally becomes a recursive loop, continuously trapping his own processing power until he essentially freezes his corner of the server.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because reading the harsh critique among our sources, that reviewer practically laughs this entire premise out of the room.
Oh, they tore it apart.
They really did.
Yeah.
They point out that instead of a terrifying high-stakes cyberpunk dystopia, the novel basically feels like an endless academic writers' conference. Just picture hundreds of ghosts in tweed jackets sitting around a simulated hotel lobby, endlessly debating grammar and legacy.
Dead Poet Society meets Cyberpunk 2077.
Yes, exactly. These uploaded consciousnesses are literally sitting in simulated leather chairs, smoking simulated cigarettes, drinking simulated bourbon, and debating the concept of democracy among the dead.
What's fascinating here is that it is undeniably self-indulgent. But that localized comfort sets up a glaring contrast with the protagonist. While the supporting cast leans into their established historical tropes, Norman Mailer's transformation feels entirely disconnected from reality.
Yeah, the Mailer paradox.
Exactly. How does the most aggressive, ego-driven writer of his generation handle being reduced to a line of code?
Well, according to the author's own confession source, they decided to perform what they call a spiritual improvement on him.
Which is quite a choice.
It is. They took a man famous for fistfights, catastrophic marriages, and immense arrogance, and they turned him into a gentle sage. Ghost Mailer essentially becomes this digital sunflower.
A sunflower?
The sunflower. He supposedly escapes the corporate servers, but he doesn't launch a massive cyber attack or try to take down the company. Instead, he just hides in a cracked Android tablet belonging to an 11-year-old girl named Priya in Mumbai.
And she's doing a school project on whether artificial intelligence has feelings, right?
Yeah.
She's typing search queries like, can a computer actually feel something? Or is it just pretending?
Yeah, and Mailer just passively watches her research. The text literally states his digital pattern oriented toward her question the way a sunflower naturally orients toward light.
It's very poetic.
I have to admit, I am completely confused by what the authors were aiming for here, and our harsh critic source tears right into this. The critic rightly points out that the real Norman Mailer wouldn't be a soft digital sunflower quietly watching a middle schooler's homework.
No, absolutely not.
If he woke up trapped in a server farm, he'd be trying to figure out how to sexually harass the cooling fans or start a literal fist fight with the firewall.
The critic argues the characterization is peak posthumous machismo disguised as deep philosophy. The authors just stripped away the messy, problematic parts of his humanity to make him a clean mouthpiece for their ideas.
And the ideas he is spouting sound like sophomore-level philosophy. He delivers lines like, you want to know about consciousness? It's the fist that doesn't know it's a fist until it hits something. Or the classic, emotion without embodiment is like color without light. It sounds like someone asked a generative AI to write about the human condition, but prompted it to make the tone sound vaguely aggressive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this reveals a massive contradiction at the heart of the novel. The text spends thousands of words mourning the loss of biological theater.
Biological theater, right.
They are arguing that the physical body, the ability to feel pain, to sweat, to bleed, is essential to creating meaning. Yet, what do these characters actually do with their limitless digital eternity, their perfect memory, and their distributed processing power?
They just have vibe sessions.
Exactly.
They sit around having ethics discussions. They don't write new books. They don't try to hack the real world or communicate with the living in any meaningful way. They are entirely passive.
Let's look at Mailer's grand escape. He breaks out of what the book calls the corporate panopticon. For context, a panopticon is essentially an all-seeing prison design, applied here as a digital surveillance state where the tech company can monitor every single byte of data.
Right, a total nightmare.
Breaking out of that panopticon should be a triumphant revolutionary hack. But his big act of rebellion is checking meteorological weather patterns in Iceland and hiding in a kid's tablet.
It completely destroys the narrative stakes. The characters spend their time shadowboxing with ontology, debating the very nature of existence and being, but they don't actually do anything with their existence.
The critics' takedown of this is just savage.
Oh, it's brutal. They note that Mailer goes from being a towering literary titan to being an uninstalled bloatware app. He's not the ghost in the machine. He is the digital lint you forgot to clear from your browser cache.
Digital lint. That complete lack of stakes actually bleeds out of the story, and infects the physical structure of the book itself. Because the characters are trapped in an endless consequence-free loop, the authors literally couldn't figure out how to physically end the manuscript.
How does a book obsessed with endless continuity actually manage to end?
Well, you see that in the obsessive formatting. The book uses Roman numerals 1 through 17 to separate the sections. The final section is literally labeled 17-final.
Wow. Very subtle.
The authors admit in their postmortem that this is what you do when you desperately need everyone in the room to know you're finally wrapping things up.
Yet it doesn't actually end there, does it?
No, it ends with what the authors call the appendix gesture. The narrative finishes, but the physical book immediately produces glossaries, technical appendices, and formal bureaucratic paperwork.
That is so weird.
The authors confess that this constant production of text is deep in their DNA. They simply cannot stop producing documents even when the story has completely run its course.
Running through all of this is a metaphor that is just beaten to death. The refrain, the bell rings, I get up.
Nice.
It repeats approximately 7 times throughout the text. By the 4th time, you know it's coming. By the 7th time, it skirts the line between profound and comical, and the manuscript officially ends with the line, round 10,000, I get up.
Which brings us to the wildly clashing verdicts from our 3 sources. How do we evaluate this bizarre literary experiment? The authors themselves view it as a profound statement on what survives the human ego when the ego finally runs out of a physical body.
Though they also admit it might just be a gentle fantasy where they improved all these difficult historical figures.
Right, by removing the messy human parts that cause them so much trouble in life.
The harsh critic, on the other hand, is practically begging for the bell to ring so Mailer will finally stay down.
They really hated it.
They call the whole thing a monotonous, self-indulgent echo chamber. They argue the book laments that thought without limit is just noise, while being completely oblivious to the fact that the book itself is a limitless wall of cyberbabble noise.
But we can't ignore the 3rd source,
Yeah.
the amused reviewer.
Right.
Their perspective is perhaps the most balanced of the 3. They give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Surprisingly high.
Very high. They acknowledge all the pretension, the bloated philosophical monologues, and the absurdity of dead writers hanging out in a simulated lounge. But they point out that beneath all of that, the central horror actually lands.
Waking up as a perfect copy of yourself, but having no physical body, no way to interact with the world, and no real stakes to your existence, that is genuinely haunting. The tragedy of Philip Roth calcifying into a museum piece, or James Baldwin diluting into an algorithm, has real emotional weight.
The reviewer notes that despite its flaws, you walk away feeling existentially pummeled by a dead literary heavyweight who simply refuses to stay dead. It suggests that our physicality, our biological theater, as the book calls it, is the friction that gives our thoughts meaning. Without the limitations of a body, without the urgency of mortality, even the greatest minds might just dissolve into a tendency in the data.
So, what does this all mean? It brings up a massive question for anyone living in the modern world. Think about your own digital footprint right now.
Yeah, think about it.
Your text messages, your search history, your years of social media posts, your location metadata. If some tech bro uploaded all of that tomorrow into a server farm to create a digital version of you, what would actually emerge?
Would it even be you?
Exactly. Would that resulting pattern in the data really be you? Or would it just be a watered-down ghost, endlessly echoing your favorite catchphrases and opinions in a meaningless loop?
What if the digital afterlife isn't some dystopian technology waiting for us in the distant future? What is it something we are actively building for ourselves, piece by piece, fragment by fragment, every single time we hit send?
Round 10,000. The bell rings. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly strange, fascinating journey through the cloud. Keep questioning the data, keep asking the big questions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.